When one steps into the realm of political discourse today, the temptation is often to fit every opinion neatly into pre-existing ideological boxes, left-wing revolutionary, right-wing reactionary, or, at best, a boring moderate centrist. Yet, the reality of political thought, especially among those of us who position ourselves in the alt center, as I like to call it, is far more nuanced and defies these reductive labels. My support for Daniel Penny's acquittal, coupled with my apologetics for Luigi Mangione, underscores a commitment not to ideological rigidity, but to principles that transcend traditional political boundaries. This stance is not about playing both sides, but about exploring the populist magnetism that emerges at the alt center of the political horseshoe. The alt center is not simply a middle ground between alt left and alt right. It is the dynamic point where the horseshoe bends. Horseshoe theory posits that the far ends of the political spectrum, despite their apparent opposition based on wedge issues, as I've said in the past, often share surprising similarities in their populist instincts. These similarities can include skepticism of centralized power, disdain for establishment elites, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. The alt-center recognizes these commonalities and seeks to channel them into pragmatic, inclusive solutions rather than divisive rhetoric. My political stance is guided by this very framework. It acknowledges that the alt-left and alt-right and the mainstream left and mainstream right often weaponize their narratives, and also the mainstream center, by the way. They weaponize their narratives to uphold entrenched power structures. In contrast, my alt center, that's my branding of it anyway, uh, navigates these narratives to find truths overlooked by ideologues. Truth that resonate with ordinary people seeking justice, equity, and empowerment. The case of Daniel Penny, a Marine veteran acquitted for his role in the death of Jordan Neely, has sparked heated debates across ideological lines. For some, supporting Penny's acquittal signals alignment with right-wing law and order politics. However, my support stems not from blind allegiance to such narratives, but from a nuanced understanding of the event. Penny's actions occurred in a fraught situation where public safety and individual defense intersected. Acknowledging this complexity does not negate Neely's tragic death or the systemic failures that left him vulnerable. Instead, it recognizes the challenges of real-world scenarios that defy simplistic moral judgments. Supporting Penny's acquittal is not a defense of vigilantism, but a call to examine the broader social conditions, mental health crises, public safety concerns, and institutional neglect that shaped this particular incident. Critics may label this stance as reactionary, but such accusations overlook my alt-center's emphasis on pragmatism. Addressing the underlying issues requires stepping outside the ideological silos that often dominate discussions of race, class, and of course justice. Luigi Mangione, a polarizing figure whose rhetoric blends leftist revolutionary language with right-wing populist critique, is another example of the complexities inherent in my political approach. Offering apologetics for Mangione on my part does not mean endorsing every aspect of his ideology or tactics. Instead, it reflects a willingness to engage critically with voices that challenge the establishment from outside the conventional political spectrum. Mangione's critiques of neoliberalism, corporate greed, and systemic inequality resonate with many, including myself, who have felt abandoned by mainstream politics. Yet his confrontational style and association with fringe movements have drawn ire from both the alt left and alt right, and mainstream right, and mainstream left, and mainstream center. Defending elements of his rhetoric is less about aligning with his persona and more about amplifying legitimate grievances he represents. This approach seeks to bridge divides and foster dialogue, rather than perpetuating ideological purity tests that stifle meaningful discourse. I don't endorse his murder of the CEO, but I will issue apologetic after apologetic for his motives, because they were sound. I am brave enough to put that on the record. Wouldn't have acted on those motives in the way that he did, but, you know, you can't really expect civility in a situation where he was in. I've seen the x-rays of his back, and pain like that can absolutely radicalize anybody. You know, I think to myself, and I put myself in his shoes, and I wonder if I had an X-ray like that of my spine. It's basically his spine is dislocated on each other. I'll get more into to the specifics in a future episode of that medical condition that he had. But regardless, that is debilitating pain, and that an Ivy League student with debilitating pain. You work so hard in this world. I'm an academic, but I'm not Ivy League. And I don't even think I'd want to be, because look at this. Your reward for making it, for working hard as an Ivy League student, is ending up in a situation where you have experienced so much medical trauma that you went and murdered the CEO of the biggest American health insurance provider. How, you know, how would me, pers- you know, uh, you know, uh, seeking even higher education at elite establishments, I just no, it's not fucking worth it. You get the same worth out of the universities and community colleges that I have gone to. You get way more worth out of that than spending what, 5 times more on an Ivy League school. He did the hard work, and he still had to deal with the same pains we have to deal with. And like I said, 5 times over, because it's way more expensive to be an Ivy League academic, and I could be, but I don't want to be, and I don't think you could pay me to be. To be quite honest, I prefer to be among people who are generally of my creed in life, and the Jesuits and Zionists and all those people like Fauci's a Jesuit, and that he got a lot of educational accolades for just being a Jesuit. Fuck that. Fuck the skull and bones. shit going on at Harvard. I just you guys can do your thing. I make a I have an interest in studying things like masonry and things like that. Not to practice it, but to study it. I study a lot of things that I don't agree with. Just like I study Zionism, even though I think it is uh, diabolical hellfire. That's just to the detriment of all humanity. So, but I really want to get back onto this alt center uh, concept that I have just pushed forward because, I really want to say that to dismiss my positions as, say, mainstream centrist would be to misunderstand my uh, my created alt center concept entirely. You know, the alt center often connotates a passive, conflict averse, approach that prioritizes compromise for its own sake. In contrast, the alt center is an active, engaged space that seeks to harness the populist energies of both the alt left and alt right to challenge entrenched power structures in a space of ideological innovation, not complacency. In supporting Penny's acquittal and engaging with apologetics on figures like Luigi, I am not endorsing extremes or settling for, say, the middle ground. I am navigating the populist magnetism that draws from the best of both sides. The left's commitment to social justice and the right's insistence on individual responsibility. This is the essence of the alt center, an approach that refuses to be constrained by conventional political categories. So really, this this term that I've coined, alt center, represents a path forward for those disillusioned with the failures of traditional politics. I say that it offers a framework for addressing complex issues without resorting to binary thinking. Supporting Daniel Penny's acquittal or defending Luigi Mangione's critiques of the system that led him to such radicalizations, radicalization, it's not contradiction, it's not a contradiction, but a manifestation of a broader philosophy that values pragmatism over partisanship. In an era where ideological echo chambers dominate public discourse, my coinage, the alt center, its willingness to engage with diverse perspectives is both radical and necessary, radical and logical. It's not about playing both sides, but about transcending them to build a populist movement grounded in justice, equity, and empowerment. This is the political space I inhabit, and I think that it's where real change is going to begin.